Welcome to the podcast, Whiskey and a Map. Stories of adventure and expeditions as told by those who live them. I'm your host, Michael Reinhart. It has been said that many adventures and expeditions start simply with a map and a glass of whiskey. A desire to go and see the world's wild places. You're invited to pull up a chair, pour yourself a glass of your favorite whiskey, and join us as we hear stories from another one of our friends just returned from the field. Welcome back to part 2 of West Hansen's epic adventure, the Amazon, from source to sea.
The police, I think 3 days later, he was getting with the police. They helped him find his kayak, but it was just a mess. So we weren't going to run it. Pulled up there with the Tigers. We had our raft, we had our kayaks, and we looked at it, and they just said, yeah, they weren't going to even run it. I mean, that's where I gained a lot of respect for the Tigers, not for what they could do, but what for the safety that they took upon themselves. They just said, yeah, you might be able to make it. It's not worth it. We're going to portage this. And we lined the raft through and got down at the bottom. That's when things got exciting. After we portaged Tiger Tooth Rapid, we're sitting in the eddy below hand, and we're all and I'm getting in my kayak, because after that I could kayak, because, it wasn't, it was something I could manage skill-wise. They're getting the raft together, and Eric Schlegel was there with his camera, and he's taking forever to get his camera together, and I'm kind of bobbing in the eddy, just kind of minding my own business. And I look down, and there's this couch pillow size, for lack of a term, bale, wrapped in a bunch of packing tape. And it's about the size of a couch pillow, and I thought, well, look at that. Just floating around in the eddy next to me. And I thought, what on earth is that? Surely it's not what I think it is. And I brought out this bale, this taped up tight bale, and I had my river knife on me, and I sliced open a little bit, and sure enough, it was some pretty tightly packed marijuana in this bale. And I said, holy crap. And so I thought I should bring this to the attention of the team. And so I called out of my kayak and up over the rocks to all the guys who were waiting in their raft and just kind of killing time, waiting for Eric to get. And I said, hey guys, look what I found. And it was pretty heavy. I mean, it was pretty densely packed. It was about a 1 foot by 1 foot by about 8 inches square bale. And all of a sudden, I was Mr. Popular amongst these young guys.
I bet you were.
yeah. Especially Simon, who is from Chile. He was very happy. I'm not one who indulges, and neither was Rafa Ortiz, but everybody else seemed pretty excited about my find, and they started cheering my name and everything. It was kind of funny. All of a sudden, instead of just being a burden, I had some value on the team. It's like, oh, this West guy. I think it's not so bad after all. So we took that on, and we all started going down the river, and I'm kayaking, and they're paddling. We're doing our thing and making our way to the town of Itzkuchaka, and we found another bale. Hey, more cheers, and another bale. And I think, I don't know, eventually how many we found, like 14 or something of these bales. And as they say, paranoia ensued, because at that point we figured, oh my gosh, either A, someone's missing some product. Very expensive product, and they're going to want it back, and we've got it. And we weren't cheering as much anymore at that point. It was like, holy crap, and we're storing this inside the hatches. We're trying to hide it as much as possible, and there's just, some of them are leaking, so there's this green slurry floating around at the bottom of the raft, and it's just wafting. I mean, no one's burning it, but it's just everywhere now. And then also, we're in this section where the narcotic police have checkpoints every 5 or 6 miles, and they're going through cars. It's like, well,
explain that to the federales.
Yeah, we may have some trouble with this here in central Peru highlands. And so I said, look, guys, this is where I get to be the leader of the team. Here's the rule. If anybody wants this, we're giving it up. We're not hiding it. If we pull up someone and they say, hey, have you seen, a trunk full of pot? Yes, here it is. Take it from us, please. Or if any cop stopped us, we are telling them before they find it. That's the rule. And they, okay. So they all agreed. And then we were getting close to Itzkuchaka, and no one had discovered us, and we weren't surrounded by a bunch of pissed off drug dealers. And I said, look, my daughter and wife and David Kelly and all these other supporters are down waiting for us at this bridge in this town. We can't show up. We're on a National Geographic expedition. We can't show up with a trunk load of pot. That's just something that can't happen. So we found a cave on the way, and we hid it in this cave along with a GPS. We had a GPS, and they took a GPS in. And I thought, okay, that's where it is. So whomever wants it after this on our team, there it is. And we finished, and that's the end of that story.
Now, there was one night you were sitting around a fire, drinking some of the local hooch, and a visitor came stalking in the night. Do you recall that?
So we're a little more than halfway down the Montaro, about over 250 some odd miles. By then, I'd got my groove. I was feeling good. And normally, at the end of the day, since I was with all these young guys, they would stay up late and I would go to bed or whatever. And in the morning, I'm up early. I'm up drinking my coffee and they're kind of rolling out of bed slowly. So it's kind of weird how the dynamic was at that. I was 50 years old at the time. And these guys were in their 20s. And I think one of them might have been in his early 30s, maybe 32 or 33. And they were all young guys. They were used to staying up late, drinking and partying and smoking things. But this was an exception. We finished that day, and it had been a long day, and I was kind of up, and the stars were out. It was a beautiful campsite, and we had a big fire going, and it was cold, so I huddled up the campfire, and we had pisco with us, which is a local whiskey or tequila type of drink down there in Peru, and I was drinking some pisco and enjoying the stars, and the guys had sacked out already. They spread up their sleeping bags on the ground a few, yards away in the dark, and they were out. They were snoozing. I had my hammock set up near them, and I believe Tino Speck had a hammock next to mine, so in the trees there. And I'm just kind of enjoying the night and the fire, and next thing you know, man, I don't know, 50 yards in front of me is this boulder field, and I see these two eyes coming out of the dark, reflecting off the firelight. In Texas, West Texas in particular, we have those eyes. And we call them mountain lions. And you can tell it's not just a raccoon or something by the distance between the eyes. That's a big head. And same thing with alligators. When you see those two red reflectors popping up out of the water, if those eyes have quite a bit of distance between them, there's a lot of alligator behind them. Well, it's the same thing with pumas. They call them pumas down there, mountain lions. And those eyes had some distance between them. And I was watching it and kind of keeping an eye out. And I had the machete near me, which was we didn't have any firearms down there. And I decided to watch it. Then next thing you know, it disappears. But then it pops out from another boulder closer. So it's making its way towards me, or at least towards the fire, from boulder to boulder. These boulders are about the size of Volkswagens. In between them, and I thought, well, shit. All right. And there goes my nice night. And so at that point, I figured I'd better tell the boys, because it had come up a couple more boulders. And so I went over to Juanito, and they were sawing logs. And I kind of nudged them. I said, hey, Juanito, I think there's a mountain lion hanging out. Just wanted to let you know. And he kind of mumbled. He said, no, I'm serious. And finally he said, what? And I said, there's a mountain lion, or you call him a puma. I think it's hanging out. I think it's around us a bit. He said, all right. And went back to sleep. I said, well, I've done my job. So I think I'm good. I went back to the fire and hung out and drank some more pisco by myself and enjoyed such a pleasant evening, and finally figured, all right, that's that. I'm going to bed. I didn't see it anymore. And as I went back to my hammock, which was strung up not too far from Tino Speck's hammock, I had the salami I had to get rid of. We've been eating a lot of salami. I thought, I like Tino, and he might get hungry at night. Maybe I ought to strap this salami right on his sleeping bag, just in case he gets hungry at night. He'll have a snack to eat. So I did give that some thought, just to be friendly.
Just to be friendly. Little snack for the kitty.
You got it.
There was one particular obstacle on the Montero, the water cannon.
Oh,
that
man.
seemed very dangerous. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the dam, Presa is the Spanish word for dam. Presa Tabla Chaca is built. It's this dam that's, on the Montaro River, and it's a huge hydroelectric dam that was built. And it channels a bunch of the water from the Montaro River through these tunnels about 20 miles long through the Andes. And in the middle of these tunnels are turbines built into the ground. So this water is being shot. I think it's called the Bernoulli effect. So the more narrow you make an area for water to go through, the stronger the force and the faster it's going to go. Well, it's spinning these turbines in these tunnels that go through the Andes. And there's a huge horseshoe bend in the Montaro River there that goes over about 150 miles. And this tunnel cuts across that bend. And there's a good chunk of water that flows down the Montaro, and there's a good chunk of water that goes through these tunnels. And that's the source of a controversy we can discuss later. But anyway, the water comes out of those tunnels from Presa Tablachaca at a very high rate of speed. I mean, it's some seriously pissed off water, and it's a lot of water. And so it doesn't just trickle out of this hole, this tunnel in the side of this mountain. It shoots out like you wouldn't believe, almost making it completely across the river. I mean, it's this huge arc of water. And it is just loud as if you're lying in the middle of a tracks on a freight train. I mean, it is loud. Well, looking at it, you think, okay, we'll just paddle underneath this thing. Because it's a pretty tall arch shooting out of the river, and it's about 30 or 40 feet, I'd say 40 feet above the surface of the river where the tunnel shoots the water out. And it looked like a cannon, and that's what the people on the bank, our bank crew, called it. It's a water cannon. And so I was in the raft at that time with Juanito, just the two of us. We're paddling it. We're not oaring it. And we tried to pull up to where the water was shooting out and go beyond its reach. But there just wasn't any way to do it because the water that was aiming was shoving the entire river against these rocks, and it would shove us against the rocks. So that's when Juanito said, let's go underneath it. And I thought, great idea. All right. You're in charge, man. I'm following you. I'm with you fellers. And so he and I paddled the raft up and started going up underneath the water cannon. And granted, you can't hear anything. I mean, it is deafening, the roar of this thing. And once we got up underneath that thing, we figured out that this water, this mass of water, also is creating a huge amount of wind, which makes sense in hindsight. If you're fanning anything, things moving, it's going to disturb the air around it. Well, it was a pretty strong wind. So we got up underneath there, and it was only then that we realized, this water is all any water that's not being shot out of the side of the mountain is all being shoved towards this thing in a maelstrom. Just like if you were to, have a water hose going down in a bucket of water, everything in that bucket's going to go towards where that water hose is spilling into that water fountain is spilling into the bucket. Well, it started dragging us towards this maelstrom, this where the water cannon was landing in the water. I mean, it had killed us. I mean, there's at 8 pounds a gallon, and there's about a bazillion gallons there. We'd have died in no time. Probably not in a fun way either. So without a lot of talk, we kind of motioned, let's get out of here. So we paddled back upriver and got out of there, and we got a new plan. And Juanito held on to the bow line of the raft while I paddled, and he walked up on the shore, on the rocky, slippery shore.
Yeah, that's
holding the bow raft.
That was one of the sketchiest portages I've ever seen.
In hindsight, maybe we both should have gone on the land. But we thought it made sense that I would stay in the raft and paddle like hell so it wouldn't pull the raft away from him. If he had dropped that rope, oh, man, it would have ruined my day. It would have screwed up my day big time. But he didn't, fortunately, and he didn't slip. And I was paddling like crazy, and he was pulling the boat, and we made it through the other side and cleaned our pants, and everything was much better. We were very happy after that. But it was a character builder. And luckily, we got it on video for the documentary. So
yeah, like I say, watching that portage, because it's not like he was crossing dry land. He's crossing across river or streams coming down, all the moss on a steep incline. It was muddy and slippery, steep, rocky incline, and Juanito, he's not a big burly guy. He's kind of a stream bean. Great kayaker, but not sure you'd want him busting down your door if there was a fire in your house. He's not a big fella. So anyway, it was in hindsight, like I said, we might have made a different plan. Now, West, when you were telling that story about the puma and all you have is the machete, It reminded me of on a training that we were doing for adventure racing. We were out on a night training, practicing night navigation, right, in the coastal mountains of California. Well, there's a lot of wild pigs out there.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you were, going along in the middle of the night, and if you disturb them, they take offense to that and they'll chase you, right? So one of the guys with us was a former Navy SEAL. He was training with us, and we're going along, and we talked about the pigs, and we could hear them. So we're stopped. We could hear the pigs, and he pulls out this knife. It's a folder. He folds it open. He's like this with the knife.
Oh,
I'm looking at him. I'm going, what the hell are you going to do with that? And he goes,
he's going to wrestle.
Now, we were all a little punchy because we've been going for a long time. And I'm just looking at him. I won't even get through that hide.
No.
And he looks at it. I think he kind of realizes in the fatigue wore off. He kind of, that ain't going to work.
Oh, my gosh. That's great. All right. You're out front. That's what I'd say. Okay. You take point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And those pigs are fast.
Yeah, we've encountered quite a few here in Texas. That's the other thing on Texas Water Safari. You get these wild pigs along the bank. And we were portaging through the swamp one time. I was on a tandem team with my buddy Jeff Wiest, who was my expedition partner. And we got run across by a whole herd of javelina. No, they were just wild pigs in the swamp. And they were just all over the place. So, yeah, they swim really well, too. You'd be surprised. Those pigs swim great.
Speaking of animals, now the description of the kayaking was dangerous enough, but those roads were even more dangerous.
Oh,
but
God.
But you had the lucky chicken. Tell us about the lucky chicken.
Yeah. Now when we were switching between the 500 miles of the Montaro Whitewater section and then the final 3,800 miles of flat water that went from the Andes to the Atlantic, we switched over to sea kayaks. And we had a whole different team for that as well. We didn't need the Tigers anymore because this was water that we could handle. Tigers headed out, and there was this transition time of a few days. So we decided to go up to this town of Ayacucho, which in Quechua means death corner. And this is where some really horrendous battles took place in colonial times and modern times. The Sendero Luminosa was born in Ayacucho from a professor that taught university there. And Ayacucho is fairly remote from the rest of Peru up in the mountains. So this death corner was where teams could fly in and fly out of because it was a fairly modern city. It's actually a really beautiful, beautiful old town. A lot of colonial architecture, a lot of art, a lot of wonderful culture there. And so we had driven up. We had a van meet us where the Montaro spills meets the Apurimac there, and this little town of Portococa. And we took this van up with our rafting gear and whitewater kayaks to Ayacucho, and we were meeting the other team coming back down. And we'd hired this driver, and he didn't speak any English, but our Spanish was good enough. I mean, we had guys from Mexico there, so yeah. And then Juanito was from Peru, so there wasn't a language problem. But this guy who Juanito decided to call Papi the entire time, I think just to piss him off, was driving like a bat out of hell. And these roads we climbed from 8,000 feet up to close to 14,000 feet. So it was a pretty steep climb, and the road was under construction. Now, the dirt road that had been there probably since the Wari or Inca times was in horrible condition. It was mud, and it was raining constantly because it is the rainforest. The road was washed out in several places, and they had a lot of construction equipment going on that tore it up even more, and it wasn't reinforced anywhere. So we were having to, at night, creep up higher and higher elevations through these scary areas, and this guy would not drive slowly. He had stop and fast, and that was it. And we had been drinking a lot by then because we were kind of celebrating getting off the Montaro River, in one piece. Plus, there's beer, so we were drinking. So it was, what are you going to do? And so we had a lot of beer. We were drinking all the way up, and then Poppy kept his window down, so we started freezing because we're climbing these elevations, and he is just driving like crazy. And it was dark, so we didn't see how dangerous it was until we headed back down maybe a week later. After we had the entire Flatwater team together, we weren't killed by Poppy on the way up. Well, we hired another van because we didn't want to ride with Poppy ever again. So we found another van, and it showed up, and we loaded our, we had 3 kayaks, 2 tandems, and 1 solo kayak on top on the racks above. And, well, it looked like these 2 kids were driving this van. It was a big old Hayachi van, or they call them Hi-Ace down there, Toyota van, which is their go-to cargo van in Peru. And it was these kids. And I thought, oh, Christ, what have we gotten ourselves into with these children? Oh, no, they assured us everything would be fine. And the Flatwater team that went down there, we didn't have any fluent Spanish speakers. We all speak some Spanish because we're all from Texas, and we used to be Spain, we used to be Mexico, so it's just, you pick it up here and there. And so we can communicate all right. Poorly, but we can get the job done. So we had these 2 boys, and the one driver we called Jose Bieber. Justin Bieber had been in the news a lot at the time, and he was up in arms because someone had made some pornographic blow-up doll that looked like him, and he wasn't real happy with it. Well, he just kept his mouth shut. Probably no one would have known. But once we found out about it, man, it was the funniest thing we had ever heard. So, poor Justin Bieber was the source of a lot of jocularity. So, before we got out of Ayacucho, we're driving along, and Jose Bieber pulls over to this nondescript little house on the edge of town, this adobe house. I thought, all right, what's going on here? And he said, little momento. Okay. Be right back. What's the call for? I don't know. We're ready to go. Let's get moving. So he comes out with this chicken. Nothing else, just this chicken, a big old red chicken. And he brings it in, and they got 2 bucket seats up there in the front of the van with the console in between. He sets that chicken on the console right there in between them, and we take off. And we're all kind of looking at each other saying, what? Is this lunch? I mean, what's the chicken all about, man? And it was just the strangest thing. And he never said, we say, hey, ¿qué pasó with the pollo? He said, he didn't answer. And finally, we had to pull over a lot to take breaks because we were drinking a lot of beer. And it was only then we figured out how bad this road was. We were heading down it instead of up it, but it dropped off straight down several thousand feet in several places. Then it was straight up on the other side of us, and it was 1 lane. And people are passing left and right? And it's just dirt with a lot of potholes and a lot of boulders in the way. So you had to kind of push those out of the way as you were making your way down. At one point, we got hung up. It was raining like hell, and there's a giant rock slide that blocked everybody. Well, coming down or coming towards us was a bus, and behind it a line of cars. And then we were in front of the line coming up or coming our way. And there's a couple of boulders in our way. So someone figured out how to work one of these large equipment operators. Another kid, I swear he must have been 12 years old, he jumps behind this excavator, and he pushes a couple of these boulders that were about half the size of a Volkswagen Bug off the side of the cliff, which was right next to us. And we all, yay, good, that's out of the way. Well, Jose Bieber, our driver, was about as aggressive as Poppy was coming up. He wasn't going to wait in line. So, hurry, get in. So he jumped in the van. We all got back in the van after, waiting around for these boulders to move. And he shoves his way straight towards this bus that's heading down towards us. And the bus has got the inside lane, so he's next to the cliff that goes straight up, and we're on the edge. So Jose and his buddy pulled the mirrors in. And I'm on the outside here. It's like, holy crap. And we're looking, and I'm looking down 2,000 some odd feet. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating on the footage here. It is straight freaking down and through this jungle. And he pulls the mirrors in, and he just guns it towards this bus. And whoever's going to win this pissing match is going to get by first. He wasn't going to wait for this bus, but he's going to do it on the outside. Like, oh, my God. And there's no other door on the other side. There's no inside door. Plus, there's a bus inches away from us that we couldn't get out if we had to. I'm looking at the back door, and Jose's just making it happen, man. And we're all leaning left, We're all
trying to keep it on the road.
Oh my God! So we all rush to the inside of the van. Let's put all our weight on these tires, that kind of thing. And the chicken's running over there. We're all working together on this, and we finally get past it. Clean our pants again, and I thought, oh crap! Jose Bieber, really, let's not do that ever again. I don't mind waiting for the bus, you know. And Jose, he doesn't get what we're saying. So anyway, we pull off to the next town because we're out of beer. And finally, I corner Jose and I say, "Man, all right, you know, you're the man. You're the man. What's with the chicken?" And he said, "Oh man, that's a pollo suerto. That's our lucky chicken." I said, "Lucky chicken? What's up with the lucky chicken?" He said, "Man, you don't want to drive this road without a lucky chicken. You're going to be in all kinds of trouble in this road. This road here, you got to have a freaking lucky chicken." All right, man. We'll take your word for it. Lucky chicken. So we got down into the town of San Francisco, near where we were going to be. There, our destination for putting back on the flat water. And he pulls over to another innocuous little house that has no bearing upon anything. Grabs the chicken, runs in, gives the chicken to whomever, comes back in and says, "All right, we're safe now. We're good." We just finished up our trip.
Must have worked, though.
It seemed to have worked. So I've sworn by the lucky chicken from here on out.
Now, you had another team coming in. Jason Jones, when he was flying in, had quite an experience on that plane. Can you tell us what happened with him?
So I told you a little bit about Jason earlier when we were down in Altalaya, and he took it personal when he got shot at. You know, he really didn't like that kind of thing. Well, he's got a pretty interesting military history. He was in the Air Force and the Marines. And when he was in the Air Force, I don't exactly know what his title was, but he worked with giant C-130 transport jets and a lot of jets, and he knew a lot about them. He was some kind of engineer with them. And as I said, we were in college together. I don't know what he studied, but it might have had something to do with intelligence, whereas my degree's in psychology. He knew a lot about large jets. And so when he came to meet us in Ayacucho to join the Flatwater team to help Eric out, to be Eric's support photographer, everything has to go through Lima. So when you fly from Lima to Cusco or to Ayacucho, you have to fly over the Andes. And it's a beautiful trip. It can be a little bit horrifying, though. The Andes are tall. And he had been bouncing from Texas on standby flights all because his girlfriend, Chris, at the time, got him these free flights. And he waited forever in Lima for a flight, several hours. We finally got on one. They took off, and they're flying over the Andes, and they got up to elevation, and he looks out the window at one of the jet engines, and there's this flap up. And he knows what that flap is. And he knew this was not supposed to be. This wasn't part of his world. So he calls over the flight attendant. And by the way, the flight attendants down there in Peru are wonderful. They're multilingual. I don't know how many languages they speak. They speak them all fairly fluently. And so and Jason speaks enough Spanish, he could have done that, but he spoke to her in English and said, "Hey, see that flap? That's not supposed to be happening." She's all smiles, being a flight attendant and whatnot. And she, "No, everything's fine, sir." No, he says, No. I'm an Air Force veteran. I'm a flight engineer. I know what's going on here. I'm not just some yahoo saying there's a flap up. That's bad. And he explained to her in technical terms why. He says, "Just tell your pilot this." And he told her what to tell her. And he said, just tell the pilot. That's all I ask. And so she's all smiles. "Sure, I'll do that, sir." And she's being, very patronizing and treating him well. And, well, a few minutes go by, and then she comes back, and her face changed. It was no longer this happy-go-lucky, "Sir, can I get you, some cookies" face. It was not that face. It was a little more serious face. And she said, "Thank you, sir. The pilot thanks you. Yes, we're aware of it. Yes, we know it's not good. Can we get you a drink on the house?" He said, "Yes, please. Jack and Coke, make it a double." Well, she did. She kept the Jack and Cokes coming, and this was in the morning. They took off in the morning. He was supposed to meet us around lunchtime in Ayacucho, and we're all running around town doing our thing, getting gear ready in Ayacucho. She kept coming. "You want another?" And every time she brought him a drink, which was frequently, she'd take a little look out the side window at that flap, and it was still there, and it wasn't like anybody was going to crawl out there and fix it, And so they're pulling into Ayacucho and winding their way through the mountains towards the one landing strip there. And man, as soon as they come in final approach and that airspeed drops down, flames start popping out of that flak. And the only thing keeping those flames at bay was the fact that they were going a million miles an hour. Now they weren't. When it dropped down a couple hundred miles an hour above stall speed, that flame popped out of there. And that pilot landed fast and hard. He said that pilot, there was no subtlety about it. He hit the ground, hit the brakes, reversed whatever engines there were, flaps were up, the whole thing, and he came to a skidding, Starsky and Hutch stopped, and right then, that engine just immersed in the flames. That jet engine just blew right up. It didn't blow up, but it flames were all over the place. Fire trucks were there, and they foamed it down. They covered the whole thing with foam. They covered the whole plane with foam. They just foamed the crap out of it, and they put that thing out, no problem. And at that point, then the door opens. Down there, you have to go out on the runway. So the little stair truck comes up with the stairs, and it puts up against everybody. And the pilot says, "Thank you for flying, and y'all have a great day." Everybody exited like this was an everyday occurrence. And Jason pulls out, and he's come to the hotel where we're staying at that point, and he comes out, he falls out of the cab. This is like 11 o'clock in the morning, and he just falls out of the cab. And we thought, look, we all like a good drink now and then, Jason, but this is 11 o'clock. He said, "Oh, what is going on here? Why are you so drunk?" And he's, "Oh, God, you wouldn't believe what I went through." and then he went and slept for the next 12 hours.
Yeah, but then he got into the vehicle with the lucky chicken and then had the death drive down to the bottom.
Well, Jason wasn't in that van. He and Eric came up a day later.
Oh, okay, so you spared that.
They were spared that. They had their own nightmare because they came down the road to hell at night and during a thunderstorm and ended up camping at this. They slept in the van where the road had washed out completely. And then to get by it in the morning, they had to tie a rope on, and they had 50 people pulling the van up because it was too slippery because they were sliding in the mud. They would have slid off the side of the thing into the canyon. So they had their own nightmare, which included everybody trapped up there cooperating with rope to pull the vehicles past this washout. So, yeah, they had more reason to drink.
So we finished the whitewater on the Montaro, and the dangers posed by that section was the river and the elements. But the next section, the red zone, what dangers were you anticipating there?
Well, the red zone was this area where all the cocaine is harvested and refined. So we did have to watch out and, be careful. We were held at gunpoint, I guess, 1, 2, 3 times there. The first incident was the first day we were kayaking, a team of 5 of us, and Eric and Jason and their chase boat were several days behind us. They still had to make a lot of arrangements to catch us, but we weren't going to wait around. We had our kayaks, we had our gear. Let's get going. Well, we pulled over to get some water towards the end of the day out of the stream that was coming out of the side because the Ine River is very muddy. So we got water from the streams that were clear. Well, there's a village there and attracted a bit of attention. And next thing you know, we're surrounded by a bunch of guys with guns. And guys meaning kids. A bunch of kids with these 12-gauge single-shot guns. And it was the first time we were held at gunpoint. And I had my camera going, luckily, at the time, so I got it all on video. And turns out the chief of the village, and they were in their all traditional uniform, which were soccer shorts and soccer jerseys, because football's huge down there. And they surrounded us, and they wanted to search all our gear. Well, he was drunk. He got close to us, and we could tell this guy was 3 sheets to the wind. But we thought, let's make friends. They're not shooting us. We don't want to. This is their home, and we don't want to piss anybody off. Let's be respectful. So we pulled open our hatches, and let us start searching stuff, and he wanted to know where we had our druggists. He thought we were drug runners. Now, we had these white sea kayaks with National Geographic flags on the back and all our sponsor decals and everything. And I thought, man, he must think we're the most stupid drug runners in the entire world. This is not exactly clandestine. So we let him search a few things. There's going to be too much for him to search, and he's kind of stumbling around at this point. And by then, the gun boys were getting bored. They had all their gun barrels pointing down towards, they were barrels of their feet the guns were sitting on their toes. I guess they were taught not to put them in the dirt. But I could just see this. I thought, how many of these gun boys around here are hobbling around now? Half a foot. And we actually talked amongst ourselves because the guys spoke a strange dialect of Spanish that might have been mixed up with their local dialect. So we weren't exactly, the Spanish was okay between us, but we weren't really getting it all. But they weren't understanding any English, I know that. And so at one point we talked amongst ourselves about, well, should we just grab their guns from them and beat the crap out of them? Because we could. They were standing too close for them. They didn't know, this wasn't jungle warfare. One of our boys, Pete, he's a Vietnam vet, so he's got a little experience in this. And all of us knew a little bit about guns, like I said. But I thought, let's just be friendly. Let's not make any enemies. They're not pointing the guns at us anymore. Let's just do what they say. And sure enough, that paid off. The guy gave us his blessing, his drunken blessing. And by then, all his guys were bored, and they wanted to be rid of us anyway. So he just said, go on, go on. So we did. And I shook his hand, and he said, we're out of here, man. So that I thought, all right, that's the way it's going to be here. And I'd read stories about guys that were shot either with arrows or guns down there that were doing exactly what we were doing. So that just made us even more hypervigilant than we already were.
Well, the place has a history. In fact, you referred to the term Pelacara. What does the term Pelacara mean?
Pelacara means, the direct translation from Spanish is peeled face, or to peel or peeling or whatever, but peeled face. And the first time that the Spaniards made it into this area, they were the first fair-skinned people that the indigenous people had ever seen. They're generally a dark brown people that live down there. The conquistadors that made it in there, Pizarro and all these others, very fair-skinned. They're Salamancan, I believe. And the only time the locals had ever seen someone with a white face was when they saw a skull, as if the skin was peeled off. So they started calling these people like they peeled the skin off their face, the brown skin, and now their faces were these white bones, so they're pelacatas. It's a derogatory term that's used today, and they kind of laugh at people that we know down there will laugh and call us a poet. It's like calling someone a Yankee. It's, the damn Yankees are coming. But pelacata was what we were called. And when we paddled by a village on the Ine River, not the Tambo, but definitely the Ine, there are a lot of villages, the people would run from us yelling, Pelacata, Pelacata. We were the bad guys, and for good reason. Prior to, the past couple of 100 years, anytime white guys would show up, they weren't being there to be friendly. They were either wanting their natural resources, the oil, the diamonds, the minerals, whatever, or they're there to try to say, hey, our religion is the right religion and your religion is the wrong one, and you need to change now. So there's not a good reputation for white guys being in their area. And we understood that, and we were going to treat it delicately. We weren't there to make a mark or be amongst them or anything. We just wanted to get through there and not bother these poor people. But we were met with fear wherever we went until we got off the Ine River to Puerto Coca. And frequently along the Ine River, people would motion us over. Say, that's okay. We're just going to pick up our pace from here on out. We camped. The one time we camped there on the Ine, we found our camp at night, and we tried to keep it really quiet, but people still saw us. So we were very apprehensive about being on the Ine River. And, as I mentioned, people have been shot down there even recently. These years. There's a missionary several years ago who had lived amongst them for years. And then one morning walked out of his cabin. There was a little house they'd lived in down there, and there's a band of a tribe that just filled him full of arrows. And no one knows why, because he got along with these people. He spoke their language. Everything was fine, but something changed, and it was his time to die. So we weren't working by our own rules there.
Yeah, you recounted in your book a legend or superstition among those local tribes about how the Paracara would take their blood and use it to lubricate or grease their machinery, and still believe it.
Yeah, currently that was some of the myth surrounding the Pelicanos there, or the white guys that were there, to either steal organs, because they knew down there that their organs were clean because they ate well. They didn't eat junk food. And they know what junk food and Coca-Colas were. I mean, these aren't backwards people. They're very intelligent. But their myths would say these are they're stealing organs to take back to, their country to use because they've corrupted all their organs. Or the other one back, started a century ago, is they had this machinery with black grease while they would steal children, and our blood is dark, and they use that blood to grease their machines. So, and children would go missing all the time because it's the jungle. I mean, it's hard not to die down there. I mean, there are things, jaguars and lions that want to kill you. There's an Indian bear. There's several things going on. Snakes. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to die down there, including just slipping in the river and drowning. So people go disappeared all the time, including children. And something had to happen. Someone had to take the blame for it. So why not these guys who have been screwing us over for centuries?
Yeah, it makes it for a touchy situation going through there, as you all found out.
Yeah, and we did not want to be in a situation where we had to defend ourselves against these poor people that have been persecuted by people that look like me for the past 300 years.
Yeah. It's funny, when I was down in Guatemala on some humanitarian projects, we're in the Alta Verapaz region. When we first got there, they're all very standoffish, all the Maya. And we learned that they were afraid we were going to come there and take their children. Yeah. And I had no idea how it came about. We were there helping to build schools, setting up medical clinics, and it was a lot to overcome before they started trusting us. And but once they did, I guess that was the safest I ever felt. Once all those folks all of a sudden flipped over and I was part of them, yeah, I never felt safer anywhere else. But interesting.
I understand their perspective, that's for sure.
Now, the Ronderos, I got to ask, they're the local narco police force, and you have to get permission from them to travel. So do you go to an office? Do you go online to the Rondero internet site? How do you get permission?
You don't go online, but you do go to an office. You go to the head of whatever town you're in, and this one was Puerto Coca. And Puerto Coca is a modern town. I mean, they've got electricity, they've got cars, they've got trucks. You can actually drive there on a very, very bad road through the mountains, and they've got stores. You can buy food there, and they've got refrigeration. It's a fairly modern town for being a jungle outpost. So we went to the mayor. Actually, Jason and Eric went to the mayor of Puerto Coca and said, okay, what paperwork do we need to get through here? And the mayor told them, and they filled out the paperwork. We filled it out, and we swore who we were and what we were doing and how many days we were going to be there and where we were going to go and who was always with us and, everything they needed to know about us. And then granted us permission, and he said, here, make sure you stop at these checkpoints along the way and let them know, hi, here's our paperwork. And I still have that paperwork. It's kind of cool. Please don't kill these guys. It's okay. And they've got their own little bureaucracy down there. But then leaving the meeting was kind of funny after the alcade, because then he says, oh, by the way, we have these tourist brochures. And he gave us these glossy tourist map of the whole area with where the waterfalls are and the natural wonders to see. And it says, welcome to our area and so forth. So it's kind of funny. It's like, here you go. It's great to have your tourism dollars here. It's like, this is quite the paradox.
Eco-narco tourism.
Exactly. As Eric Schlegel probably said, you need to work on your welcoming committee here a little bit.
Yeah, that just seems so strange that the narcos would have this formal travel passes.
Right. Well, they had a business to run. And that's when we were talking to the guy in Poyene who was running the narco trafficking in that area, he said, look, we're all brothers. We all need to get along. And he was real down on the boat captain who wouldn't show his papers. He said, we all need to trust each other. He said, this is just a business. If no one bought it, we wouldn't be selling it. If rocks sold, we'd be selling rocks. They're not evil people. They're just trying to make a living. And it just happens to be with this drug that's, highly desired in the United States, and elsewhere in the industrialized world. And, to come down on them primarily who, they want to buy food and this, that, and the other, they have very few resources. I'm not saying what they're doing is right. I'm just saying it's not as clean cut as good guys and bad guys. And so they don't want, lawlessness. They want their people to be treated right. They want the people to be fed. They want health care. They don't want anybody hurting anybody. And so they have a very strict law enforcement system.
Interesting.
Without the police, without the Army, without the CIA. It's like, no, we're going to manage our own down here.
Probably better.
I imagine the courts are a little more cut and dried than ours, too.
The third and final leg is basically a long flatwater run to the coast. And can you tell us about that section?
Well, when we got onto the flatwater, I was now in my element. The whitewater I was getting used to, but whitewater is very anaerobic. While I was trained in whitewater in the 1980s, this was a good, almost 30 years later. So my whitewater skills weren't what my flatwater skills were. But now we're in my backyard, ultramarathon canoeing, kayaking. So I knew what to eat. I knew how to paddle. My shoulder was less of a threat of going out because I could adjust my stroke. We were using wing blades, which are very powerful double-bladed paddles. So now it's just long, slogging miles through the humid jungle. Once again, it was a different type of beauty. It's still very green. It smelled amazing. And as I think I put in my book, if green had a smell, that's what it would be. It was just like a freshly mown lawn times 100. It smelled amazing. It was really nice because in the Andes there was no smell because we were above the tree line. There was no foliage until we got down to the cloud forest. So when we started smelling things again, it was like, oh, this is great. This can actually smell things. Well, that was a whole different world. Cultures were different. Spanish was more ubiquitous, so we could communicate a little bit better. And the towns took on a different flavor. These were jungle outpost towns, and logging was big, legal and illegal. So we saw a lot of the illegal logging, and we met up with a guy that owned a timber company down there, and he explained to us how we could tell the difference between legal and illegal logging. And the logs that were on a barge being hauled around, that was legal logging. But when you saw huge rafts of logs being floated down to the mill, that was illegal logging, generally speaking, because the legal loggers wanted their wood to stay dry to be made into flooring or lumber. Flooring is a big deal. These old hardwoods, and then also they didn't cut old growth. A lot of the legal lumber companies only cut new growth, and so the team dynamic changed a lot. We had a fellow there who wasn't happy most of the time with anything, and so that became a bit of an obstacle for me as a team leader and how to deal with that. And that was very difficult. And it really taught me, to ask important questions and to look closer at personalities when I'm choosing teams in the future. And, and he's a decent guy. It wasn't like he was inherently just an ass, but it was just a tough situation for him. And he had trouble adapting to the team dynamic in which we were confined, 24/7. So it was just not a good fit. And that tested, my abilities, and I wasn't great at it. And I've learned a lot, so hopefully I'm better now in some of my issues.
Yeah, one of your teammates had a quote, and he said, "It gets pretty primal when food is important."
Yeah. So then, as opposed to the whitewater where we would, kayak for a short amount of time and then camp for the day, and the mileage was a lot shorter, and our actual paddling time the water was pushing us along, so we didn't really have to paddle that much on the whitewater. Well, flatwater was all paddling. So we were doing 12 to 14 hours nonstop. We would drift and eat. Rarely would we pull over and eat, but sometimes we'd pull over for lunch. We got to the point where we'd stop once a day, but we wouldn't stop more than that. So this was nonstop paddling. It was hot. Luckily, it wasn't as hot as Texas. So I think a lot of people who hadn't been to the Amazon will be surprised to hear that I think the highest it got was 90 degrees, but it was, damn near 100% humidity. But it was cooler than Texas. Texas at the time was 110 Fahrenheit and really humid and hot. So we felt, 90 degrees, all of us boys from Texas, we were okay. It's like, we've been in a lot hotter than this. So that wasn't a barrier, but it was still wearing on us, and our level of fatigue was pretty constant. We would eat a lot. Just picture going 14 hours a day without stopping. You're constantly burning calories. And so we could not eat enough. And getting fat and protein was really difficult. Carbs we could eat left and right. And we were having electrolyte pills, and we were drinking plenty of water because we were filtering our water right out of the river, so that wasn't a problem. But just getting enough food for that kind of effort was, as Ian said, very primal. We were always hungry. Always.
And as you proceed down, it was day after day after day of just hard, consistent paddling to get down through there. I mean, you're covering hundreds of miles, thousands of miles. Take us to the mouth of the river, because at that point, though, it changed again and got a little dicey. Yeah,
about that. The Amazon gets bigger as it goes because you have these larger rivers flowing into it. To give an example of the size, I mean, the Amazon is frequently 5 miles across. And this is a fast-flowing river that's 5 miles across. So just think of a lake, your average local lake. And it's sitting there placid, you can look and you can barely see 5 miles over there. But now picture it moving really fast, at 8 knots. So now this is what we're in. This is our world. And we're paddling, anywhere from, 40 to 70 miles a day on this river. And we're actually having to move, even though the river's moving. You can't just sit still. We're trying to make headway. Well, the river's getting wider and wider. And so anytime we have to make a turn, it's like, well, do we cross here and then cut off some of this turn? It was a big deal. You don't just cross a river when it's 5 miles wide and hauling ass. It took a lot of planning. The Madeira River, for instance, when it comes in below Manaus, it would be the second largest river in the world if it had gone to an ocean, but it didn't. It spilled into the Amazon. So now it wasn't deemed, the longest river in the world, or one of the second longest. So that's how much the Rio Negro, same thing, when it spilled in there, it was just like a whole other ocean coming into this one river, the Amazon. And so it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And the waves were getting bigger, but we were managing it fine, and we're still moving along well, but it's just daunting. Well, 10 days before we finished, we pulled into the town of Santarém, which is known as the Riviera of the Amazon, because it's a beautiful resort town with black beaches and good food and nice people, and it was just a really beautiful town. And we had to make a new plan then because there are a lot of pirates between Santarém and the Atlantic Ocean for the next few hundred miles. I can't remember how many hundreds it is from there. And we hired an off-duty narcotics officer, Sergeant Giesch, to come on a boat that we had hired to follow us, which was great because we could put all our gear on the boat, and they would follow us, and we were lighter then, and we traveled a lot faster. We were down to 3 people by then. It was Jeff Weisty, Ian Rolls, and myself. And Jeff and Ian were in a tandem kayak, and I was in a solo kayak, sea kayak. At that point, the tidal flow was starting to get to us, and this isn't the famous Pirarucu or whatever it's called, that this giant tidal bore that comes in. It's not that. But every 6 hours, the Atlantic Ocean would send its tide up the Amazon River. And we would make zero headway because the tide would come in so strong. And we'd watch our GPSs, and when we got down to 0 miles an hour or 1 mile an hour, it's like, okay, time to pull over. And so every 6 hours, that dictated our schedule. We didn't do this day-night schedule anymore. We would paddle in the middle of the night if the tide had flowed around. So every 6 hours, we'd get up and we'd continue paddling in the direction of the river that was flowing towards the Atlantic for about 10 days. And then we wormed our way through the southern part of Ilha Marajo, which is a giant island the size of Switzerland at the end of the Amazon River, through all these mangrove swamps and everything. We finally came out near the town of Belém, a very large town in Brazil, near the mouth of the Amazon River. And that's where we lost our guide boat. We couldn't go any further because the waves were going to get too big for his type of boat. So he gave us all our gear back, and we paid him the rest of the money we owed him. And we were on our own again for the last 70 miles. Well, we met up at a little town of Mosquero with Jeff's wife and his grandson were there to meet us, and Jason was there, and Eric was there, and they were going to try to follow us to the end, but they couldn't find a boat. And we said, well, we can't wait around. We're taking off. So we took off in the middle of the night for the last 70 miles. And we hand-railed all these mangrove swamps, and so there's no land. It was just swamp. So if we wanted to pull over, we couldn't. And the tide was coming and going, and at one point we had paddled about almost 42 hours without sleep. And we found this giant sand dune island across from this beacon, this lighthouse-type beacon. It was an unmanned beacon that acted as a lighthouse. It's called Point Taipu, and many Amazon expeditions have finished at Point Taipu, thinking, okay, well, this signifies the end of the Amazon River. Well, it didn't. I mean, we could see land beyond Point Taipu. There's another, 12 miles to go after that. And I looked on GPS, like, yeah, we don't get to the Atlantic Ocean for a while here. So it said, let's get some sleep. So we pulled up on this sandbar that was dry. It was a big old island. And we pitched our tents, and it was getting to be dark. Let's get some sleep, and tomorrow we'll wake up and we'll paddle out to the Atlantic Ocean, and then we'll paddle back in. Well, about 2 hours after we'd fallen asleep, and we were wiped out. And our water, we didn't have any water there because it's all salt water by then, or brackish water. So we had very little water and very little food. We didn't have enough water to heat more food either, cook more food, because you realize, oh, we'd had water all this way, but now the water's brackish. Can't filter that. So we were conserving our water. About 2 hours after we went to bed, Jeff comes to my tent and wakes me up. Hey, Wes, time to get up. We got to go. And I thought, well, this is strange because Jeff's always the last one out of bed. And Jeff, at that point, was a coffee drinker. He's a teetotaler now. But, man, if you didn't wake Jeff up with a cup of coffee, he's not getting up. So the fact that he was waking me up, I knew something was wrong. He said, tide's coming up. I stepped out of the tent into water. Now, we were 12, 14 feet above the water when we went to bed. And the mouth of the Amazon is 90 miles wide there. If you look on a map, it is literally 90 miles. So we had misjudged the tides or something big time, and the water was rushing in fast. We just tore the tents down, didn't try to pack anything. We threw everything in the hatches of the kayaks and jumped in the kayaks. When I got in my kayak, I was in knee-deep water. It was coming in that fast. And holy crap, and it's dark all around us. It's about, 10 o'clock at night, I guess. And so we look all around us, and we're well past any cities. You know, we've gone almost 60 miles beyond Belém, Mosquero. We're out in these mangrove swamps. There's no place for a village out there, so there's no lights. And, of course, it's gorgeous. But we're in the middle of the mouth of the Amazon. It's kind of freaky. I said, well, what do you boys want to do? We've only slept for a couple of hours. I mean, we can go try to find land. I mean, we knew what direction it was in, but whether there would be any land there or not is anybody's guess. It's just flooded mangroves. So it's like, well, that's not going to do us any good. Well, let's just go for it. Let's just finish this thing. So, all right, let's go. I mean, the water was calm. Let's give it a shot. And so we turned on our spot trackers, which we had one in each boat, or I had one in my boat. I can't recall. And luckily, my sister, Barbara Eddington, who's our expedition manager for all our expeditions, she was up and she saw it pop on. And so she alerted the internet world that, hey, these guys are going for it. So we started paddling out to the Atlantic Ocean. And I had the GPS on, so we knew how far to go. And we were paddling, and it was blissful. This bioluminescent algae or life forms started lighting up all around us whenever we disturbed the water with our blades or our kayak. And it was just gorgeous. It was surreal. It was heavenly. It was stars on the water. It was really accurate because it looked like as many stars above as there were below. And it was just wonderful. And that went away fast. Because when we got past that sandbar onto which we had camped, now all of a sudden, since we were in this fairly shallow water, we started having to go through breakers. And the breakers were getting bigger and bigger. We hit some 3-footers and we paddled through them, and then we get to some flats and we paddled for that for a while. They kept getting bigger and bigger. Then they stopped being breakers, fortunately, and became rollers. But the rollers got to be bigger and bigger, and there were these fish traps out there that were made of these logs that were sticking straight up out of the bottom. They'd be planted in the river in this huge corral that was about 50 foot in circumference when the tide was out. And then fish would come in during high tide, and when they would recede, the fish would get trapped in these big old log traps. And this was recorded back in the 1800s during Robert Louis Herndon's expedition in 1852. He talked about the same traps out there. So this was an old thing that's been going on a long time, this fish trap. Well, we had a kayak through it with no lights. And so we're going up on these waves and these fish traps would disappear, and then we'd go down, and then these spikes would come up, and we'd have to figure our way through these things, that were about 4 feet across, and kind of weave our way before they spike up through the middle of one of our Kevlar and carbon fiber kayaks. It was a bit unnerving. And so we'd have to aim it just right, and we finally got past it. Well, we didn't have any water set up, so we'd raft up every once in a while. And what was one of the most scary things is we didn't put on our PFDs. We were in such a hurry to get moving. We had our skirts with us. And normally we'd have a PFD, ready at hand, but we had shoved them all in. We thought we were going to land again somewhere. We didn't plan on this. So we're out there, the three of us, without the most basic element of being out there, a flotation device. But the water was so rough, there wasn't any way that we could have dug them out of our cockpits, our hatches. So we knew this was a bad place to be. So we thought, all right, well, let's just get this thing over with. Hell, it's only 12 miles. How long could it take? 6 hours. That's how long it takes. We paddled straight east into the Atlantic Ocean, and the waves got bigger and bigger. Luckily, there were rollers. They weren't breakers. But they came in so strong that it really slowed our progress because the tide was so strong. But we kept chugging forward and chugging forward and chugging forward. The stars would disappear on the horizon, and that's how we could tell how tall the waves were. And then we would measure them. My boat was 18 feet long, and we would measure them. They would look at my boat going up it, and there were 30-foot faces of these rollers because they could measure it against my boat. We'd have to race to the top of it and slam down the other side and race down the bottom and get our speed up to get up to the top of the next one. They just kept getting bigger and bigger. It was a sphincter tightening moment, I can assure you. Well, we finally got past this place that we had labeled on the GPS as, stop Forrest, on the Forrest Gump movie. And we figured there we could stop. And we got there, and I said, well, let's go another couple hundred yards just to make sure we finish the entire Amazon. So then we paddled out into the ocean for a couple hundred yards, and I said, all right, boys, let's get the hell out of here. We're done. We turned tail, and we surfed in. Luckily, going with the waves was a lot faster to the nearest beach. And we made it in, and Jeff and Ian tumped over right then because we hit some breakers. And all their stuff splattered around, and we knee-deep water. We grabbed everything together, and we found this one bag of Cheetos. Ian loves Cheetos. And it doesn't offer much sustenance, but we were looking for any pleasure out there. And so we gave Ian all the Cheetos. But it's like, oh, this one little piece of heaven. Ian got his little bag of Cheetos. And we made camp for the night, and that was that.
Quite an epic story.
It was a lot of fun.
Lessons learned and thoughts about exploration. Your book, not only is it a great read for the adventure expedition about it, I think it's a must read for anybody who's thinking about putting together this type of an expedition. And because you really document very well all the challenges that an expedition leader has to face. And I thought it was just an excellent work. And so I wanted to give a special shout out for that book because I think it's well worth the read.
Thank you. And I got to give a lot of credit to Jeff Moog. He's the former editor of Canoe and Kayak Magazine and a good friend. Jeff was my editor for that book, and he helped me carve it down to about half the size. He took out a lot of stuff that would have made me look like more of an ass than I already am. He did a really good job of helping me carve that down into something that's readable.
Well, you had a section, a quote in this book where you described, I think, from what you learned from this expedition about what the leader of an expedition has to be. Somebody who's confident in what they're doing. They got to be able to make decisions, but they also have to listen to their team. Can you explain that a little bit more? Yeah,
and the way I see an expedition leader, at least the way I like to do it, I've learned from a lot of people, specifically Roald Amundsen. And I think Roald was a great expedition leader because I think, like him, what I try to do is I see myself as an employee of the expedition. It's my job to manage it. It's my job to make sure everybody's taken care of. They're all getting along. The dynamic's good. If we have some injuries, it's taken care of. I am an employee. I'm not a guy that stands in the back and tells people what to do. Plus, we have to have consensus. It's not what I would call a democracy necessarily, because I really feel like all the responsibility is on my shoulders. But if there's one person on the expedition that doesn't want to paddle from here to there or do something because it sounds risky, all of a sudden you've got a weak link you need to address. And you can't just say, well, the majority rules. That's not how expeditions work. You can't have one person that's hesitant or that isn't into what's going on, because that one person, like I said, the one bad apple spoils the entire bunch. And I'm not saying that one person would be a bad apple, but if they're not fully into whatever you're doing in that moment, you're going to have the entire expedition break down. And that's been proven time and again on classic expeditions, on modern expeditions. You got to have, and not a majority, you've got to have the entire team in on it. And I really feel like as an expedition leader, that's my job to make sure that happens through the planning stages and also the execution stages. We were in Russia kayaking the Volga River, Jeff and I, and it was a real interesting lesson over there. There's one of our friends in Russia who asked us one time, President Obama was in office at the time, and he said, President Putin has 98% favorability, whereas your President Obama only has 48%. How can he rule with so many people criticizing him? And we said, and that really was an eye-opener to us, and it was kind of surprising they looked at it from that perspective. We said, well, we don't elect the president to rule. We elect him as a manager. He's our employee. He is hired to help manage things that we consider important. And then after a few years, he's fired. He can't, his contract is up. He's an employee. Well, that's the way I see my job as an expedition leader. I'm there for the team. And, if you're the type of leader that says it's my way or the highway, or this is the way it's going to be, and y'all can all go to hell, I'm the leader, you're not going to have a successful expedition. You really got to have not just a majority, but 100% agreement on everything y'all do.
Now, that is a fine line to walk, to be both a leader, make sure things get done, as well as forming and getting that consensus and everybody buying in on the next leg of the journey.
Yeah. Well, and you also have to have a team. I mean, I don't want to surround myself with people that are just yes people. It's like I got to have a team that, as the author said in the famous book Fields of Fire, he said, that's not in the shit business. You can't give it or take it. And if team members need to be able to tell me that I'm full of shit, and they have to feel comfortable doing so, or tell me I'm wrong. And if they don't, then I feel a huge burden on my shoulders of always having to do the right thing. Because, man, I'm going to screw up.
Yeah, sometimes they're right.
Yeah, and exactly. And you got to have a way of conveying that to me and to the rest of the team of saying, look, you're wrong, and here's why you're wrong. And so you can't just have someone that's polite or a wallflower that doesn't step forward and assertively say, look, this isn't the way it's going to happen. We need to talk about this. And that's who I want on my team. I got to have someone that is not afraid to come up to me and say, you're full of crap.
Your book,
they got to back it up.
Yeah. They just can't just pull it out of, where.
Right. I don't like you. I don't like your hair. Yeah.
Your book got me thinking too about, putting together teams, and I kind of reflected on teams that I've been on and adventure races and so forth. And, it seems like, a lot of these expeditions, after the adrenaline wears off at the start, you get to that point about the middle where you don't see the end yet that gets your adrenaline going. It's just that slog every day, grinding it out, right? And there's not always a lot of talking. And it got me reflecting that I think probably something to look for in teammates is somebody who is comfortable inside their own head. Because you spend a lot of time without distractions. And if you're just not comfortable inside your own head, the demons that are always going to be talking to you get pretty loud.
You're absolutely right. And there is that period of malaise that you get into. And I actually kind of look forward to that. It's kind of a period without time or distance, because it never seems like you're going to end at that point. I mean, in Joseph Heller's famous book, Catch-22, there's a character in there who wants to live forever. And he knows he can't live forever. He knows rationally that's impossible. So what he does is he makes his life as boring as possible, so it just feels like it's forever. And that's how I view that period in an expedition. And you're absolutely right. That does happen. I've come to the point where I kind of like that, because that's when the team is running like a well-oiled machine. You get into your routine. Then it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get into a routine of setting up a camp, of cooking, of filtering water, and doing this, that, and the other. Once you can get to the point where you're doing that without any thought, then you're making some serious progress. But also, you're right, you get into your head. But that's also why I want to bring in new people to expeditions. We've got a couple of new people on our next expedition. I mean, I've known Jeff for 30 some odd years, Jeff Weisty. There's not a lot of new information we're going to get from each other, which is a comfort. At the same time, it's nice to hear the new stories. So we're bringing in some new people. I'm always looking at having people join our expeditions. But they've got to fit the right personality for that. And so that's always good. And I like to hear Jeff tell his old stories that I've heard a million times to new people. So that's a lot of fun to hear also. And hopefully he thinks the same. Who knows? He's probably thinking, oh, great. But that middle section, you're right. You got to be comfortable in your own head. You got to be comfortable with endlessness. And we're just cranking out the miles. On my expeditions, I would listen to an iPod, and I still have an iPod, of poetry, and I would spend days on end on the same poem on repeat, like The Charge of the Light Brigade, classic poems, and then recite them. And I'd also like to sing, so I'll sing to myself sometimes. But things like that. But I'm okay with that. I know one time on the Amazon we're 3 guys, so conversation isn't necessarily that important to us. And we were paddling several hours, and then all of a sudden, one of us said, "Hey, what have y'all been thinking about?" And I said, "Well, I've been building a house, pier and beam house, and it's 2-story, and it's this, that, and the other." And I went through, because I'm a contractor in the building, and this is what I was doing, and so on and so forth. And then the other guys would talk about what they've been doing in their mind for the past few hours. So it's always interesting to see what they're doing. Several explorers, I'm sure, in your line of business and on this amazing podcast, Whiskey and a Map, that talk about their depression when they're finished. And I've run into that, and it is deep. And it's when you're done, it's like you're thrilled to see your family, you're able to have a little romance, which you miss out there. You're thrilled to get some great food and start putting some weight back on and things like this. So all these things that you've been missing all this time, you're back at it. But then after about a week, the depression sets in. And you realize, reaching that goal was fun, but that wasn't while I was there.
Yeah, you just think back to a particular spot on the river that caught your attention, that waterfall that was coming in at just the right time.
The daily routine, the existence out there. Yeah, that's a big deal.
Well, this is a perfect segue into the Northwest Passage.
Da-da!
And Arctic Cowboys, which is on the T-shirt. So what's coming up?
Yeah, we attempted to kayak the entire Northwest Passage last year with our team of 3, and there are some things that, of all the research I did for the past 3 years on it, there are some things that we still had to learn, and we did. We ended up going about 260 miles, and now we're coming back with a new plan, much smarter, and we're very excited about it. And I'm even more optimistic about being the first to ever cover the entire 2,000 miles of the Northwest Passage in a human-powered vessel. This is either rowing or kayaking. There have been plenty of people sail it. There's some people that have done a good portion of it, kayaking. John Waterman, for one, has probably written the best book on it ever, Arctic Crossing. And John has given me some really good advice. But there's no one that's actually gone from the one perimeter to the other perimeter of the 2,000-mile Northwest Passage as Roald Amundsen had done. He was the first to actually navigate it over water only.
And for those who are geographically challenged, where is the North Passage and what is it?
The Northwest Passage is a series, it could be several different routes that go through the Canadian Arctic archipelago. And that is above the mainland of Canada, between Canada and the North Pole. There's a whole archipelago, which is a group of islands, very large islands, that goes from, on the east side, Baffin Bay, over to the Beaufort Sea on the west side. The Beaufort Sea is the sea that's just north of Alaska. So this goes, Baffin Bay is in between Greenland and Canada. It's this large bay, Baffin Bay. And the Beaufort Sea is part of the Arctic Ocean north of Alaska. So there's this huge archipelago, and you can weave your way through these islands in any one of different configurations, and it's called the Northwest Passage. There's not just one route. But we're going to be taking a route very similar to what was taken by Roald Amundsen in 1906, with a slight variation. We're going to go down Navy Board Inlet, cut through Bellot Strait instead of going straight down through Kiel Sound, which was blocked when he was there.
And this must be a special trip for you, especially since Amundsen did it.
Yeah, and actually, I did not know a whole lot about Amundsen before I started doing research on the passage, and then I read the books about him and did some more research on it, and that's where I ended up really admiring the guy. I mean, he was the first human being to the South Pole. There's this somewhat infamous race between he and Robert Falcon Scott, and by then Amundsen had been through the Northwest Passage, and he learned about living and traveling in the Arctic from the Inuit there, whereas Scott came in with the British bravado and hubris and figured, the British way was the best way, and ended up being his demise, but literal
didn't
demise.
end well.
But Amundsen learned from people who lived in those times, and of course was very successful. Smaller team, polar appropriate gear, dogs, the whole bit, everything that the North Pole uses. So, yeah, to follow in his steps is pretty amazing. But also, John Ross and several other explorers up there that were looking for the missing Franklin expedition is also very exciting, because there was a lot of history, from the 1700s to current times. And there's a lot of history up there that a lot of people don't know about, and a lot of it's still preserved in weather stations along the banks. There's a lot of obvious Inuit history up there, and we've developed a lot of friends up there in the Inuit communities. Titus Alulu, shout out to Titus in Pond Inlet, and all our other friends that have really taught us things that we could not have learned until we actually got there. Small things that are huge when you're on the water. Like, by the way, it's colder on the water than it is on land. Things like that. That means a lot.
Do you have a date set for this next attempt?
We're going to leave hopefully about a month earlier than we did last time. We left at the beginning of August last year. We're going to leave at the beginning of July this year, still from Baffin Bay, and head west to the Beaufort Sea, primarily because that's the prevailing winds. And also we want to leave. Leaving from the east means that winter will be chasing us because we're further north by several latitudes, and heading south. So the weather will be getting colder behind us, whereas if we go the other direction, we are going to try to beat the winter to the end. And I think that's people that have tried what we're doing before ran into that problem because they would run into ice and they couldn't get past us, whereas we're starting in the most icy conditions, technically harder conditions, and getting through those first and finishing, Coronation Gulf and the Amundsen Bay and the areas down south, which won't be frozen over probably till December.
Now, for those folks who want to especially follow that expedition, follow you and your exploits, how can they do that?
Well, you can look at westhansen.com. That's WESTHANSEN.com. And from there, you can find our Arctic Cowboys website link. And we have a wonderful webmaster and general all-around tech genius. And I know he cringed at me calling him that, but Tom McGuire came on the team last year. And, he's one of these guys that will start explaining something to you that you just have to stop him because it's so technical. It's so amazing. He has mastered the whole wind, weather, wave thing up there. So his predictions are extremely accurate. And he has set up a tracking system that people can follow us, 10-minute hits, so people can see us in real time while we're up there. Now he's setting it up that we'll be able to send photographs from those hits wherever we are, so people can actually see some live, not footage, but at least some still shots while we're up there. So go to thearcticcowboys.com, or westhansen.com, and follow us live starting this summer.
I'll have links to all of that in the show notes.
Thank you, Michael.
Any final thoughts?
Well, yeah. There's a lot of mystique. A couple of things I'd like to shoot down real quick that I think a lot of the general public think. People that do what I do aren't superhuman. And you can learn everything you need to know to do what we do. Yes, you have to train. You have to get your skills up. You have to do all the right things. But if you really want to do it, seek out people who have done it before and learn from them. People email me, pretty frequently and asking about Amazon expeditions or something else that I've done, like going to Russia when we did the Volga River. I'm happy to share, and most people are. I think most explorers are a lot more accessible than you think. Eric Larson, Polar Explorer, I had coffee with him last time I was in Crested Butte. But Eric's such a great guy, and he was happy to come over and have coffee. And there are some very notable people out there that are actually probably within reach. So if you're interested in doing something like this, hunt down these people. Take a chance. Talk to them. I think most of them are going to be very helpful and quite amenable. The other thing is that people that do what I do, there's only a very small, maybe less than 10% that have the money to do it. The expeditions you may hear great things about. Some of them, if Jimmy Chin's associated with it, sure, you can know this is $1 million expedition and it's well funded. But when we have a sponsor, it's usually a gear sponsor. We raise the money ourselves. Everybody on the team works. I'm a social worker and a carpenter. A lot of these expeditions you see out there, Erden Uruk recently had to stop his circumnavigation of the planet and climbing all the major peaks on the planet because of lack of money. It's as simple as that. It looks like with his rowing rig that he might have a lot of money, but that's not the case. Most people are just like me. They're worker bees. They're trying to get by. We don't have any financial sponsors. If anybody knows one, have them give me a call. But just keep that in mind when you're following us across the Arctic. That the four of us that are going this year, we're just working stiffs, and we're making the best with what we have to do this amazing journey. So just keep those couple of things in mind, and we'd really appreciate it.
Well said. Outstanding. West, this has been a pleasure having this conversation with you, and I hope maybe this time next year we'll have you back on, and you can tell us all about the Northwest Passage.
It'll be pretty exciting, Michael.
All right, West, we'll see you down the road, and be safe.
Take care, Michael.
All right, take care. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you down the road when we get together again, share a glass of whiskey, and hear more stories of adventure as told by those who live them. Until then, check us out at michaeljreinhart.com, where you'll find more of my work as an adventure photojournalist. Photos, videos, and articles of interesting people, mysterious places, and exotic cultures from the wild places of the world.